Welcome to the Faith Talks Wood Podcast. I'm Will from Flat Woodworks.
And I'm Tom from Mountain Valley Maker.
And we're a podcast talks about everything from Jesus to joinery. So, Tom, I got the mower out yesterday, and I spent, an hour and a half mowing the grass. And that's not even all. I mean, we've got 5 acres open where the house sits. Probably 3 of it's mowable, and I probably mow acre and a half, maybe 2 acres, probably not that much. And so it's funny, the mower I bought it used, and it's got actually ag tires on it on the back, so it's like tractor tires. And so I'm mowing, and the big field in the back that goes back to like the wood line, it's kind of muddy around it, but we like to walk around it. And I'm looking as I'm finishing up mowing the backyard, and I was like, there's a little bit of a wet spot to get to where I could mow. Like, I wonder if I can make it through that, my zero turn. So I send it. And sure enough, man, I thought I was going to get stuck, but those ag tires got me right out of it. And then I mowed that little strip there and came back through, and that coming back through, I didn't even stop. I just full bore ahead and just skirted across the water. But yeah, little pushing the mower a little bit. It's been, it's amazing how well a mower mows when the blades are sharp. It's night and day. I could see where I mowed last week where I hadn't sharpened the blades yet, and then I sharpened the blades, and you could tell how more crisp it looks and stuff. And I'm not like, I was kind of funny. Our first house we owned in Tennessee, it had a small yard, and my neighbor, catty corner from us across the street, we swear his yard was like industrial waste. It was so green. And anytime we'd get snow in the winter in Tennessee, his yard would never get covered. It was like, what in the world is this guy putting on his lawn? It was perfect. No dandelions, nothing, like a golf course, right? And so I told my wife, I says, I'm going to make my yard as nice as his. And so I started buying 21-13-12, I think it is. And so it's a mixture for your grass, has like nitrogen and stuff in it. And I started spreading that. And being a novice, I didn't know. I took the 80-pound bag and put it all in my front yard that was probably 30 by 40, and spread it with a spreader. I regretted that, because let me tell you what, that grass, I had to mow it every day almost. I mean, it was like growing like crazy, but it did what I wanted to, and it turned it green, like lush green. But man, that summer I regretted it, because that's before I had a riding mower or anything. And so I was push mowing that, and it's probably every other day I come home from work and have to get the mower out and mow the front yard because I had put too much stuff on it. Well, then, being Mr. Genius that I am, our second house in Tennessee, we had 1.5 acres, and I mowed all of it because it wasn't that bad. I bought the big zero turn, and it was nice. And what did I do? I went and bought 3 bags of that stuff, and I put it all over the yard. Bad idea. Had the nicest looking yard in the neighborhood, but boy, was it a pain in the butt, just mowing all that stuff. But yeah, I'm not doing that here. I live out in the country now. I don't care. It was kind of like that weird, like keeping up with the Joneses, like that neighborhood war, like, who's gonna have the nicest yard kind of thing. And now I got kids and work a lot, and I just don't have time for that. But how's your week been, man?
Oh man, it's been good. Been busy, but good. A lot of work out on the farm, getting everything ready. And I think I told you I'm getting ready to take a trip, and so trying to get everything tidied up and finished before I head out. Got all my sign jobs completed, and then been working on the farm. And speaking of mowing, I've been weed eating. Man, I swear it seems like spring like kind of crept in over the course of like 3 days and then went full bore, and everything just started growing. It is crazy. But The one fun thing I did this week, though, I think I told you, I went and traded an old snowboard in on some pickleball paddles for me and my wife, just kind of try out because I
Yeah, you
didn't want to
said
spend.
that.
Dude, we went and played pickleball and we are hooked, man. But the funny thing is, I wouldn't consider myself an athlete. But I'm the one that likes sports and plays sport. Dude, my wife crushes me in this. Dude, she has got, I'm like, did you used to play tennis or something? But she has just got the perfect little stroke, man. She's running me all over the court. But
That's hilarious.
it is, but we had a ball though, man. So it's fantastic because now we got a sport or an activity that we can do together. Because my wife, she likes to be outside, but she likes to be outside tinkering in the garden, messing with flowers and, vegetables and things like that. Or she loves messing with the chickens and the dog. But as far as like sports, she's not really into any sports. So, but what instigated this is her sister and my brother-in-law, they got into playing it. And so they've been talking about it. So when I suggested, it's like, yeah, we could do this with Kelly and Tony when they come. And so now we've got a little, they're on a cross-country trip in their RV right now, and they're coming back in July. So we got a little group text going, like challenging the family pickleball tournament championship coming up in July type thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But
that's awesome. So speaking of mowing and flowers, you guys will find this funny. When we bought this house that we're in now, I may have told the story in the podcast. When you buy a new place, especially when you have lots of land or yard, big yard, it always takes you a few mows to figure out the best pattern for the most efficient mow pattern, right? To get it down. And so I start mowing the yard, and probably the second or third time I'm mowing the yard, every time this stupid bush is hitting me in the face. And so I keep going around the house. It's hit me in the face. And so one day I went out there before I mowed and I grabbed the chainsaw and I chopped it off so it wouldn't hit me in the face. Apparently that was a lilac bush. And I was almost sleeping on the couch. My wife's like, you cut down the lilac? I didn't cut down the lilac bush. I just trimmed off part of the main trunk of the lilac bush. Talk about a mad wife, but don't do that, guys. Well, the problem was that it wasn't in bloom. And so when we moved in, lilac has a pretty short span on when it's like full bloom. So it wasn't, and I didn't know what it was. I was just like, it hits me in the face. I knew that much, and it was coming down. And funny enough, it's kind of grown back and it hits me in the face now. Right now it's in bloom. And so it smells really good, hits me in the face, and really helps with my allergies. If you guys can hear my nasalness. So, but man, before we get into the guests, just want to say thank you to all the patron supporters of the podcast. Really appreciate you guys. If anybody wants to support the podcast, if you feel led to do so, you could do so at patreon.com/Faith Talks Wood. And we really appreciate everybody that does that. You can also give us a 5-star review on Apple, and just pray for us. We enjoy the podcast, and we want this to be God honoring. And so without further ado, so our guest today, how I got to know who he is from my good buddy, Drew Fisher. And so when we started this podcast over a year ago, I reached out on Instagram to Drew Fisher, and I just said, hey man, I listen to your podcast. I'm just looking for some pointers, somebody that can make sure I don't make mistakes in doing the podcast, that we do it right. And he sent me his number, and then we had like an hour and a half conversation. And he just gave me the ins and outs of podcasting, and we talked about our faith. And at some point in the conversation, I guess recently within that time period, he had a conversation with Cody, and he had gotten to know Cody and learned his testimony, and was like, if you guys are doing a faith podcast, you have to talk to Cody Elkins. He's awesome. And so I shot him a message on Instagram, and since then we've gotten to know each other, and Cody and I were hanging out all the time at Workbench Con, and stayed up till like 1:30 one night just talking about life and testimonies and stuff like that. And so Without further ado, Cody, man, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, fellas. Thank you so much for having me on, man. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, man, it's great to have you on. It's funny because I talked about having you on a long time ago, and just never got around to scheduling it and making it happen. Well, then Tom goes gung ho and schedules people out through September, and it was funny. What we started doing with the podcast is doing every other week. So one week we'll have a guest, the next week we'll have a normal episode where we'll give like a Bible devotion and then have some sort of topic we talk about, and you talk about what's in the shop. And Tom and I were talking about it the other day, and we realized that by scheduling you today in the way that it's falling, we're going to have 3 guests in a row, which is fine because we've realized how beneficial it is that people really enjoy hearing testimonies and hearing people's story and whatnot. And so what we like to do on here is just ask, start off with, Cody, who are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll jump into your faith, your testimony. How did you come to know the Lord, and what's that journey been like?
Yeah, sure. Well, my name's Cody Elkins. I live all the way out here in sunny Arizona, which is great. I've pretty much lived here my whole life. I'm married to my wife, Bridget. We've been married for about 12 years now, coming up on 13. We have 4 children, and we're about to have another one on the way. We're like 2 weeks out. So my wife, like literally, if she calls me freaking out saying, "Oh my gosh, I think I might have to cut out early." I don't think that's going to happen, but we're just, like I said, 2 weeks out from having another baby girl. So, dude, I'm totally outnumbered. I have my daughter Evelyn, she's 8. Eliza, she is 6. And we have Abigail, who's 2 years old, and then we're having another baby girl. So that's 4 girls I'm going to have in the house. I'm totally outnumbered. And then we have an older son. His name's Alden. He actually he graduated last year and just moved out, got his very first apartment about 3 months ago. And so he's adulting and doing life and having fun. And so it's kind of interesting because one kid moves out and then like another one comes in. So it's kind of like just rinse and repeat. But it's good stuff, man. I love it.
That's awesome, man. I tell you, I only have one girl, but I'm too outnumbered by my wife and daughter. But I tell you what, I would not trade my daughter for anything in the world. There's just something special about a daddy-daughter relationship. So, and you could have 4
Absolutely.
of them. Man. So
Yeah, 4 of them.
We have one of each, and my daughter, who's a year old, and my son, who will be 4 this month, but she is like 3 girls in one. She's wild, man. And she's got like tenacity, and she's like aggressive and determined. And then we have 2 girl dogs and then a guy cat. And so we're kind of even, so it's fun though.
Well, it's crazy too, because I guess we have the recessive gene in our family, and we got 2 redheads already, 2 little redheaded girls, and I have no idea what this third one's going to be. But it's funny because like Evelyn, she's the oldest girl, and man, she's like super smart, super sweet. Like we got them, we homeschool our kids, and so we're involved in some really good like co-op schools. So we go to a school called Excelsior, and my wife teaches there. But it's a private Christian school, and it's only 1 day a week. And the homeschool curriculum is in line with the homeschool curriculum. But they're like really heavy, like on the academic side. So like my girls are learning like Latin and playing piano, and I'm like, "You're 6. How do you even know what that is?" Like it's crazy. So there's like that side, right? The like sweet, like just I'm super proud of them. And then there's Abigail. She's the 2-year-old, and she's a redhead. And like, man, all of the rumors about redheads being like fiery and just having like a crazy attitude, with the first redhead, it's not like that at all. But our second one, Abigail, she's nuts, man. She's like fearless, and she just has a 2-year-old attitude to go with it. But it's so funny, you know.
That's hilarious. Olivia,
So I
she's
guess
a year old. She's like that. Ooh.
it's a lot of fun though. It keeps us young, I think.
Oh yeah.
But
I homeschooled my daughter after the 4th grade, and it's the best thing I ever did. It is.
yeah,
So my daughter's 20 years old. She'll be graduating college this year. And people are always like, well, how in the world is she graduating so young? It's like, we homeschooled her.
yeah,
It's like, so, and also it's not just about, I think they get a better education by homeschooling because you're focused and everything, but also you have all that extra time because it does not take as long to homeschool them as it does if you send them to private school and let them go and spend the whole entire day. And so they get time to spend with the family and time to do other activities. And I just think it depends upon where you live. But for us, it was a really great choice. And so I commend you for doing that.
I'm so thankful that the Lord's blessed us with the ability to do homeschool. So when Bridget got pregnant with Evelyn, Alden was in public school and my wife was working at the time. And once we found out that she was pregnant, she was like, well, I don't want to be around the type of chemicals that she was around at work. So we're like, well, you know what? Let's just let's try the stay-at-home mom thing and, try homeschool. So we got Alden out of public school when he was like in 3rd grade. And so we were able to homeschool him all the way up through high school. And man, I'm such a huge advocate for homeschool now. Like it's probably one of the best things that we've done as a family together. And as a leader of my home too, the school, it's Christ-centered. And all of the families that are part of that Excelsior school, we're such like-minded, just good, like wholesome people, you know, and even though they only go once a week, like it's a traditional school, so they have to like wear the uniforms and, they start off with prayer in school, which is awesome. And then the other thing too is, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but, when my wife and I decided to go all in and make tool manufacturing a full-time gig for us, that really freed up my schedule to participate more in the homeschool stuff, right? So back in the day when I was working full-time in the aerospace and defense industry, it was really hard for me to take off a Friday to go on a field trip, but now that we've been able to kind of start this and establish this business, it's just given me more opportunities to participate and to go on the homeschool field trips or do whatever. It was really cool, actually. So they all know that like I'm a maker, right? And they know that I have CNC machines and lasers and, my big CNC grinder. And so it's really cool with a lot of the stuff at the school. They want to start doing more like wood projects for the kids. And so I got to help them make a bunch of like toolbox kits for the kids. And it's a old fashioned looking toolbox where, like something your grandpa would have. And so it was cool. I made up about 20 of these kits and cut it all out on my Onefinity and, got it all ready for them. Then we took to school and kind of walked them through, how to assemble it. We talked about woodworking, and man, the kids just lit up. They loved it. It was like one of their favorite things that they did. And so now being able to participate more, from that capacity too is a lot of fun.
Yep. When I was homeschooling, Kaylee, I've still got videos of her installing fence gates and cutting stuff on the miter saw and everything. But the cool thing about the homeschooling aspect, like, so for example, when we were studying geography, I took her on a month-long cross-country trip. I took them because I was self-employed. I could do that. But we went and visited the places that we were studying about, handed her a map and said, okay, you got to get us from North Carolina to Arizona. And we didn't use GPS, anything. It's all her reading the maps. And then like studying math and geometry and angles and stuff. Take her out to the shop and make the stuff applicable, because it's much easier to learn stuff when you can see it, touch it, feel it, hear it, versus just reading about it in a book and trusting that somebody tells you the Grand Canyon exists. You know what I mean? It's Absolutely. Just really cool.
Well, so like, sorry, were you going to say something, Will?
No, I was just going to say on the homeschooling side of things. So Eli, he'll be 4 this month. And so this fall is preschool, right? And so my wife and I have been praying about what to do. And I don't necessarily think, and we haven't had the conversation seriously, but that my wife wants to homeschool. Like, that's not the way her mind works and the way that she works as a person. I don't think it would work well. However, we did get him accepted and enrolled into a private Christian school that he'll start this fall. And so we may be taking the middle ground. It's going to be expensive for him to go, but that was kind of our thing. Like, we don't want to do public school, especially in Pennsylvania, man. It's as left crazy here as anywhere. And so we're just praying about that and knowing that the Lord will provide the funds, and
absolutely,
he'll be able to go. So we kind of talked about the homeschool thing, but I don't know if it's in her blood, if you will, to have that kind of structure.
Yeah. And it wasn't in my wife's. So when we did it, my wife stayed home from the time my daughter was born up until she went to public school. And then she would she worked for me with my business, and she would come in and work for the hours while she was in school, and then go back, pick her up, and come home. And but the first 4 years she stayed at home with her. But there were things happening in the school, and then when I sold that business, my wife was kind of tired of just being at home, and she had an opportunity to work at the garden center, which is her gift. My wife touches a plant and it grows. It's like just magical. But when we made that choice, I said, well, I'll move my business back home. I'll go back to working for myself. And then the first year I was back home was when we really saw things going on in the public school that we didn't like. And so that's when we started kind of thinking about the homeschool option, and didn't really know how to do it, how to execute it. And we thought we had the same perception that most people did, that homeschool kids were weird. They were the ones that, couldn't socialize with people. And but I was like, I don't like the gang activity and the things going on in the school. And so we started researching, and while we were researching, we ran into her 3rd grade teacher in the bookstore. And we told her what we were thinking about doing. And her 3rd grade teacher said, for Kaylee, 100% yes. And I asked her what she meant by that. And she said, I know that Kaylee will do the work, and I know that you will make her do the work. She said, the problem with homeschool is that some people pull their kids out of school with good intentions, but then because they have the freedom, they say, we got this stuff to do today. We'll do the schoolwork tomorrow. And they do that time and time again. And then 5 years down the road, the kid's so far behind. So she said, it takes disciplined parents, but if you do it, your kid will get a better education. And so we decided to try it for 1 year. I said, and she told us, she said, try it for 5th grade. She's not going to fall behind. Your daughter's already 2-3 years ahead of everybody else. And so we tried it for 1 year. And after that, my daughter's like, I don't want to go back to public school. And so it worked out really, really well. We were able to get her involved. And we had a homeschool organization, and we had the option of going every Monday to a what we called a co-op, like you guys do. Yep. But our co-op would only allow you to miss. It was either 1 or 2 days in the semester, and we had planned trips But ours were education. It wasn't like we were just going to goof off all the time. But I would reward my daughter by taking her snowboarding, and we would work our butts off, get all the schoolwork done, and then take a few days, or either we'd go to the mountain, take the schoolwork with us. We'd get up in the morning, do schoolwork, then snowboard for the day, and then come back in, So that's the only reason we didn't do the co-op. But we did participate in the homeschool sports activities. And I ended up coaching the homeschool soccer team. And to this day, my daughter's best friends are still from that homeschool soccer team. The families were, like you said, they have the same values we do, and just lifelong friendships made.
What's funny though is that that stereotype of weird homeschooler still does apply. I dated one of them in college, and great family, nice enough people, but didn't prepare their kids for what the real world had. And when she encountered, now I'll just say it on the podcast, she was at college, first year at university, and saw two females kissing. As an 18-year-old, was so confused by that, had a mental breakdown. Her mom had to come pick her up from school. And so that's the extreme that can happen if you don't properly, because it's one thing to, the Amish, like where I live at, don't participate in the world at all. They're completely removed, which isn't biblical. And there's reasons for that. But we are to be in the world, not of the world, right? We're to be insulated by the Holy Spirit as we go into the world. And so that doesn't mean we do weed and drink and party, but it does mean that we need to have those relationships outside of, right, those circles. And so, but that's my homeschool experience.
That's funny. No, it's a good thing. And honestly, like, my advice for you, Will, like, if you guys decide to go down like the homeschool path, or even want to look into it, like, I think it's totally different today than what it was 10 years ago. I mean, my best friend in high school, he was a homeschool kid, and, he wasn't, we always joked around saying that he was weird, but I grew up working on ranches like my whole life. Like, my parents rodeoed and team roped, and my buddy Ty, like, he roped, and we used to do all that kind of stuff together. And so we were really like social people, and even like him being homeschooled, he was really social. But back then there was definitely that perspective, like, man, if you were homeschooled, like, you are a weird kid, right? Well, now today, especially after COVID, because when COVID shut everything down for like 2 years, and I don't know about where you guys are at, but here in Arizona, they sent all the kids home, and they were trying to teach the kids through the internet, do public school while they were at home. And there's a lot of families that we know today that after they kind of saw how the school was conducting everything, that they ended up pulling them out and started to do homeschool after that. And once they kind of got an idea and got their feet wet of what it's actually like, and then found the community, like, there's so many different curriculums and different things you can do to craft it specifically for your child's like learning ability. And so for that perspective, like, it's really good. And there's a lot of support, and there's a lot of places you can go to just kind of learn more about it. But honestly, man, I would just do whatever the Lord's telling you to do. I mean, if you feel, pretty strongly about keeping your kid, in public school, by all means, like, do what the Lord's telling you to do, Yeah. But for us in our family, it was time to pull him out all in when he was in third grade. There were number of like several things that happened that I don't want to go into like grave detail, but there's just stuff that went against everything we believed in, like, as Christians, and we didn't want to be a part of that. And so we decided to do the homeschool thing, and we never looked back. So,
and we would never do homeschooling. Like I said, he's enrolled for private Christian, which is the school my wife graduated from. And so she is a private Christian, so she's partially weird. but man, let's get rolling into your testimony. So I know I've heard it before. You and I tried to have conversation on the phone, but I live out in the country and I'd lose you all the time. But man, tell us about who you are from early age up to where you are now, and your faith and your journey, and what life has brought at you. I can't wait for people to hear this.
Oh man, I don't even know. Where do you want me, dude? When you give your your testimony never ends, right? Like once you get saved, like it's an ongoing thing. But I guess for me, so you know how, so there's people out there, right? And they always say like, oh, if there's a loving God out there, how can he allow like bad things happen to like good people or like children and all this stuff? And every time I hear that, like I always just kind of like smile, because I think my story, like if you can just give it an overarching like theme, like literally it's a story of like miracles and grace, you know, because I'm by God's grace, I'm sitting here today having this conversation with you. I shouldn't even be alive, like literally. So I was born with a heart valve condition called aortic stenosis. And, you know, when I was born, they were like, there wasn't really much you can do for it. So they just were like, well, just kind of live your lives and we'll monitor it. And, you know, we'll kind of figure it out as you go. And so with me living and working on ranches, like we didn't have a lot of money when I was younger. You know, we were, you know, I don't want to say we were dirt poor, but we didn't have a lot of money and we didn't have health insurance. So going to doctors and all these different stuff as a kid, like it was a big deal. And, you know, so number one, you know, people are like, oh, there's a loving God. How can these bad things happen to like children? Well, I was that child, right? That I was like born with a bad heart. And so as I got older, when I was like 2 years old, I ended up getting asthma also. So now it's like, oh, double whammy. So here's this kid born with a bad heart valve. And at 2 years old, he ends up getting asthma. Like, how could a loving God allow this to happen, right? And so as time went on, you know, we would go to the doctor and they would monitor everything. And sure enough, they were like, it's going to get to a point where I was going to have like major open heart surgery. We just didn't know when. They just needed to watch it and see how it goes. And so lo and behold, like time goes on, and it was about fourth grade, like 9 years old or so. I had to go in and have my first open heart surgery. And I remember my parents were like really stressing out about it because we didn't have a lot of money and we didn't have health insurance. Well, we ended up getting hit by a drunk driver when I was, I don't know, like 5 or 6. And then the money that my parents got from the settlement from the car accident is what paid for my very first heart surgery. So it was like all of these like gnarly things were happening when I was a kid, right? But it's like every single time I look back, I know it sounds cliche, but I can see like the fingerprints of God over all of these like major situations, right? That the world would call like bad or gnarly or wrong or whatever. And so the other thing too is before my, you know, first heart surgery, like I wasn't allowed to go outside and play on the playground. Like I had to stay in the nurse's office. And actually I think that's where I kind of became a maker, because I just played with Tinker Toys and Legos and Ninja Turtles, dude. That was like all I did, you know, and I loved it. And I think that's where I really started becoming a maker, when I was a little kid in the nurse's office, because I couldn't go play football with my friends or whatever. And so the interesting thing though is, you know, when you're a kid and you're running around, like I couldn't feel my heart. It didn't hurt. So there was nothing to really stop me. Well, because I got asthma when I was a kid, it was so severe. Like we'd play hide and go seek and I'd hide in the closet and I'd be the first one found because I'd be wheezing, right? So I was like the worst at hide and go seek, having asthma when I was a kid. But if I would have never got asthma, I probably wouldn't be here today, because my asthma kept me from getting too overactive, which kept my heart from exploding, right? And then getting hit by the drunk driver and getting money from that, which, you know, contributed towards the medical bills that got my first open heart surgery, and all that stuff just kind of led up to it. And the whole time, you know, being raised by cowboys, it was always, you know, God, family, country, like in that order. And it's very like, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, just kind of your classic cowboy way of growing up, I guess. And so I remember like always believing in God, but we didn't go to church. I mean, I never went to church. I think I remember going to church when with some friends, like I'd go to Awanas with them or whatever. And that was fun. We'd go and memorize like Bible verses when we were kids. And I couldn't play any of the games because I couldn't run around. They're afraid I was going to die playing kickball or something. But I always believed in God, right? I always knew like there was something that was out there. So fast forward, I had my first open heart surgery, and it was just a quick fix. And sure enough, it only lasted for about 2 years. And we knew that we were going to have open heart surgery again. And it was April 12th, 1996 is when I had my last open heart surgery. Well, about 3 days prior to that, I'd since then gotten older and I was allowed to go outside and go to the playground or whatever. And I was kind of roughhousing with one of my friends. And all of a sudden I passed out. I started feeling really dizzy and I passed out on the playground. And the next thing you know, I had like an out of body experience. And have you ever like, so I don't know. People see different things or whatever, but for me, like when I had the out of body experience, I was up above my body, like maybe 50 feet, and I could see myself like laying on the ground, and everything was in black and white. And you know how they say that you see like a bright light before you die? Well, I remember seeing the sun. I don't know if that's considered the bright light or not, but I remember seeing the sun when I like had this out of body experience. And I remember looking down at my body, and it was almost as if somebody like had hit pause on a movie. And I remember like looking over and seeing the kids on the basketball courts, and the ball was like suspended in the air where they were throwing it up. And then on the other side of the playground, I could see kids on the swings, and, you know, where they're going back and forth. It was as if somebody like hit pause and they were just like stuck there. Right. And I remember looking down on my body, and I was like in the fetal position, and no joke, to this day, I remember thinking this. I said, I need to wake up because kids are going to make fun of me for sleeping on the playground. And no joke, it wasn't 2 seconds later, like I woke up. And when I woke up, I was like in the same exact position that I saw myself when I was way up above my body. And the same kids who were playing basketball were over there. And I was really nauseous, had a really bad headache. And I managed to walk to the nurse's office. And 3 days later, I ended up having major open heart surgery. And they ended up putting somebody else's heart valve in me when I was 11. And it's been crazy. And I remember the very first time I ever like really prayed was before I had that open heart surgery. I was with my mom, and there's like little chapel thing. And like, I wasn't scared. I was nervous, but like, I don't know, as a kid, like I don't remember being scared, like somebody would be scared of the dark or whatever. It was just something I knew that I had to do. And it was just a part of my life, kind of being that kid with a bad heart. And, but I remember going in there, and I told my mom, I was like, I want to go into the chapel. And I asked her if she would pray with me. And she just like looked at me, and like her eyes just kind of welled up a little bit, because we didn't pray together and she didn't like raise me to do that. But for some reason, I just had this, I felt like I wanted to pray. And so we went in there, and my mom and I, we got down and we prayed together. And I don't even remember what we said. But that was like the first instance where I was like, okay, there's something more to this life than what we can tangibly see, touch, and feel, right? Like I had that out of body experience, had all these gnarly things happen in my life, which I believe God used for good, right? Because if I wouldn't have got asthma, I wouldn't be here today. If we wouldn't gotten hit by the drunk driver, I probably wouldn't be here today, right? Like, so all of these things happened. And then when I was probably about 13, a teenager by that time, in my mind, I was like, I'm going to die young. So I tried living 30 years of life in like a 4-year span. So I was getting into trouble and sneaking out and going to parties and drinking beer. I never did any drugs, like anything gnarly, because I was afraid it was going to hurt my heart. So I never like did meth or speed or anything crazy like that. But I started kind of going down that path. And the whole time I just was like, I just always had that nagging feeling like there's something more to this life. And when I was 15 years old, I got to the point where I was like, okay, well, I never went to church. I want to learn more about it. So I started going to Barnes and Noble, and I was reading up on every religion that I could like learn. Right. So I learned about like Buddhism and Christianity and, you know, everything about Catholicism. And like, and I was just doing this because I didn't know, I didn't grow up in the church. And so I was kind of hungry for it. And then the next thing you know is like everywhere I turned, there'd be somebody come up to me out of nowhere and they'd be like, man, I don't know why, but it just, can I pray for you? I just really feel like I want to pray for you. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird, but sure. And, you know, some old lady in the sidewalk would pray for me. And the next thing you know, I'd look up and I'd see a bumper sticker that had like the Jesus fish. And it's like everywhere I started looking, I just saw all these like signs that were pointing me to the Lord. And then when I was 16, I ended up getting saved at a county fair. There were some friends that I went to high school with that they were in this booth, and it was an unmarked booth. And I was like, dude, what are you guys doing here? And he's like, we're sharing the gospel. And it was right around that time when I was learning about all these different religions. And it's like, I knew a little bit about, you know, Christ. And one thing that did, you know, stand out to me is when I was learning about all these different people like Buddha and Gautama Siddhartha, whatever his name was, and all these other religions, like Christianity was the only religion where God humbled himself and became man, right? But in all the other religions, those men became a god of some sort, you know, and I remember like seeing that and recognizing it before I got saved. But it's like everything was pointing me to the Lord. And so I was at that booth and I ended up talking to my buddy and we went over the gospel and right then and there he's like, well, if you want, you know, we can pray right now if you want to be saved. And I was like, dude, I'm all in. I was like, let's do it. So right there at the county fair, we ended up praying with them. And that was the day that I got saved. It was like September of, gosh, I don't even know what year now. But no joke, like my life literally went from, you know, chasing girls to going to parties to doing all these crazy things. I was kind of a bully in school because when I was a kid, even though I didn't play sports, I was friends with all the jocks. And then when we got into high school, they were all the big popular jocks. And so like I hung out with them. Of course, they were mean to all like the nerdy kids and Christians or whatever. And I was kind of in that camp. And then after I got saved, the Lord just completely changed my heart. And I stopped drinking. I stopped going to parties and I started going to church, going to youth group at Calvary Chapel up in Prescott on Wednesday nights and Sunday mornings and Sunday nights. And I never stopped. I've been going ever since. And, you know, ever since then, I feel like the Lord's really kind of blessed me with opportunities to do a lot of evangelism and like outreach. And I've been on several mission trips. I've been totally blessed with the ability to serve and to run the children's ministry. And so I've had a lot of opportunities to kind of teach and be a part of that. And it's been a wild ride since I was 16 years old till now. And yeah, so that's kind of my testimony in a nutshell on how I got saved. And there was a point in my life where I backslid. I was about 23 maybe. And I'd gotten married right when I was 18, right out of high school, and did everything right, did everything we were supposed to do. And she ended up having an affair. And after that, the marriage ended. And I started hanging out with some old buddies from high school, and they were going to the bars all the time, and they're in car clubs. And so I was like, oh, well, it's not a big deal to have a beer. And next thing you know, I was drinking all the time. And it became an issue, like where alcohol was like, I became an alcoholic. And, you know, if I had a good day, I had a beer. If I had a bad day, I had a beer. And I was totally ashamed about it. And I was hiding it and, you know, totally backslidden. But the Lord brought me through it. And I've been sober for like 4 years now. Haven't touched a drop of alcohol. But that's important too. That's a part of my story, because that was the grace part where God is just relentless, you know, and then the miracle side, the fact that I'm even here, still alive, talking to you, sharing my story with you guys. It's been awesome.
Yeah, that's so cool. And one of the things that you and I connected with at Workbench Con is that anybody that's been, I mean, it's a party scene. And you and I were like, yeah, this is not our scene. And so we went out in the lobby and sat down and by the bathrooms out there, and we talked and talked and talked. And and so, man, that's incredible to see how you recognize the fingerprints of God. Because in my testimony, it's kind of a similar thing, not the same story, but like I can see how God has brought me through all the stuff that I've been through. And through your testimony, it's the same thing. Like, that car accident when it happened, you may have not been able to get that for surgery, and then all these different things that led up to where you are now. And even even being where you're at up until you backslid and had the divorce and you went through that stuff, God was always there with you in the midst of it.
Absolutely.
Right. And so he never left you or forsake you. And he was crying out to you, and it just took time for you to come back around.
Well, and you know what the funny part was too? Like when I got saved, like I said, I went all in. Like I 100% turned around. Like I stopped drinking until I was like 22 or 23. Like, but at that time, I was serving in the high school ministry. I was one of the high school leaders, and my wife and I both, at that time when we were married, we were serving, and like my brother-in-law was a pastor at Calvary Chapel. And so when that whole thing happened, it was devastating, because when I was going through the divorce, I had to step down from serving, and it was devastating for me. Like it was absolutely devastating, because I was like, man, I'm called to be here. I'm called to serve. I mean, probably one of my favorite verses, I think it's in Genesis. It's either 18:3 or 3:18. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's basically the story where Abraham, he was like sitting there, he was chilling on this like hill, he had his tent, and it said he lifted up his eyes and he saw like the angel of the Lord coming. So there's like three of them, and the word says that he fell like prostrate on the ground. He laid face down and he said, Lord, if I've found favor in your sight, please don't walk on by your servant. And that was like my heart, right? And so when I was asked to step down from serving, it just crushed me. And I remember before I really started backsliding, Pastor Al at the time, I was a Wednesday night service, and he, was over and we're all hanging out, and he drove by and he just like stopped and he rolled down the window. And he's like, hey, Cody. And he called me over, and he's like, I know what you're going through, and I know it's really tough, but he's like, don't stop doing what you're doing. He's like, don't stop serving. Don't stop, seeking after the Lord. And this is right when I started going through all the divorce stuff. And I will never forget that, because the moment that I stopped serving and the moment that I started isolating myself from other believers and from people who really did care, like who knew me, who I was, like it was at that point when I started to backslide, is when I stepped away from the church, and I stepped away from people that, I mean, for years and years we were serving together. And I wish I would have heeded that advice, but at the same time, like, I think the Lord showed me a lot of things. And it's actually funny, because my wife, Bridget, at that time, I remember after I got divorced, I was like, man, I'm never going to date a Christian girl again. Like, I'm done. And so I ended up meeting my wife at a bar. And next thing you know, I don't even know how, but we started talking about like religion and the Bible. And I was like, oh, I kind of know a lot about this. And so we started talking, and sure enough, my wife ends up getting saved. And so my whole plan of never dating a Christian, like God's like, oh yeah, watch this. So she ends up getting saved. And and so now we've been married for about, 13 years now. And it's been awesome. It's been great. She's been so like instrumental in my story and in my faith. And she was definitely the one I think the Lord set up for me. So
Man, that is a powerful story, dude. All of it's powerful. It's amazing how God can take something, and it talks about in the Bible how all things work together for his good, but how he can take a drunk driver accident and turn it into, hey, okay, now we'll get your open heart surgery. It's just, that's amazing. That's
and I don't even feel like just that was the Reader's Digest of everything, right? Like there's so much more that the Lord did in my life, and so many other like medical issues that I had to deal with. And it was funny because even after I got saved, so I had a hip replacement when I was like 26. And even like when I was going through all that stuff and having to get a hip replacement, like I remember I was at a gun show one day and there was this lady that was behind this booth, and I start, talking to her, and she was just like all like, you can just see it all over her face. She was just like freaking out. And I was like, well, what's going on? And she's like, well, I'm really concerned because I'm about to have a hip replacement. And I'm like, weird, me too. As a matter of fact, I'm going in like next Wednesday. And it was like God used that as an opportunity for me to just like pray for this lady that I just randomly met. And even when I went in for like the hip replacement, I remember when the nurse that was there, when I was talking to her, she was asking about my medical history. And I basically told her the same thing I told you, just kind of gave my testimony. And she starts tearing up and she's like, my son is right now is like going through dialysis or something crazy. And I was like, trust me, like I know that little boy. And I was like, what you're doing right now, just keep loving him and encouraging him and praying with him. And so here I am laying in a bed after I have a hip replacement, can't feel anything. I'm completely numb. And I'm praying for the nurses and doctors that are in my room who are like super worried and scared because their kids are sick or whatever. And it's like God used it. He always does,
Man, so powerful.
It's crazy. Lord's awesome.
And unfortunately, I think that too many times as a Christian, we don't take that when we feel the Lord pricking us to pray for somebody. We don't take that seriously. And the fact that you've taken that seriously and that people have around you on a sidewalk, right? Ladies like, hey, I just want to pray for you. That's just a testimony to the Lord. That's amazing. I love it.
Yeah. And I don't know, man, it's when the Lord puts something on your heart and it's heavy and you know what I mean? Like, I don't get it. I don't fully understand. I just want to be that servant, right? I want to be like Abraham, like, Lord, please don't walk on by your servant. That's always kind of been my heart with all of this stuff. And even though, life gets hard and it's kind of crazy, I think God honors that and he blesses it. And, what the world sees as something that's gnarly or bad or rough or, an unloving God, it's quite the contrary. And my life is an example of that, and I get to share that with people.
That's awesome, man. Well, so you're in the aerospace defense world. I know from our previous talks, I think you were in like the quality control, right, side of things, and that. So what got you into the maker space, the CNC? Because I know that's kind of where you kind of started. Where did that all come from, and what was that journey like getting to where you are now with lasers and CNCs, and now you make your own tool? How did that come about?
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, I think I've always been a maker at heart. Ever since I was a kid building Legos, I mean, that was my thing, was just building stuff all the time, or building tree forts. Or I remember when I was a kid, man, we made the baddest tree forts. They were like 3 stories tall with trap doors and pulley systems. Like that was just what we did, growing up in a smaller town and just running wild up, making tree forts and stuff. And so I've always just, I don't know, I feel like it's just always been in my blood. And how I got started doing what I'm doing now is, for the longest time working in manufacturing. So I was a quality engineer at a small company. But because it was a small company, I was also the setup guy. I was also the machinist. I was also the janitor. I was also, quality manager, quality engineer. Like I had all these different positions. And over the years, like I just kind of had to fill the gap, whether that be like welding or machining or developing quality systems for the AS9100 or the NADCAP quality systems. Like I was just kind of always in the right spot at the right time. And so just with my ability to be able to read prints and build stuff, that's kind of how I got started doing all the stuff that I'm doing now. But when I was at home, like I was doing all this stuff at work and running big 5-axis CNC machines and that stuff. And I told my wife, I was like, you know what? I just want to build a robot in the garage. So I ended up, I talked her into it, and she let me buy a Bob's CNC. And so I bought a Bob's CNC machine, and it's a kit that you buy and you put it together. It's made all out of like Baltic birch plywood and about 1 million screws and nuts and bolts, and you have to build the whole thing. I absolutely loved it. It was awesome. So I ended up getting that as my first CNC machine in my little 2-car garage. And then as soon as people started hearing that I had a CNC router in the garage, next thing you know, people were hiring me to make unions for them or flags for people or signs for people. And so like that machine paid for the next machine, which was another Bob CNC. And then eventually a Shapeoko XXL3, and then eventually a Onefinity. And I've had several lasers. I have my Thunder laser now, but it all just kind of started stacking on top of each other as I was just building stuff and working full time. And the reason why I wanted to kind of share with you guys the fact that I kind of dealt with alcohol in my life, and it was something that I was, clearly addicted to, and the Lord was telling me for a long time to get out of my life. And the whole time I was just like, no, it's not that big of a deal. I'm a grown man. If I want to go have a beer, it's no big thing, whatever. And biblically, people can say, well, it's not a sin to drink a beer. Well, you're right. The Bible doesn't say that. But for some people like me, the Lord told me to stop drinking. And because I didn't, like, that's where I was in sin, right? I wasn't being obedient to what he told me to do. And for a long time, I just kept doing my own thing. And the moment that I got real and I became sober, that's when I developed the very first Jenny Bit. And it was after that, the Lord just started blessing everything else to what I have today. And it's really funny because, I'll make it quick, but my son Alden, when he turned 16, I gave him the same deal that my parents gave me. My parents matched whatever I saved for my very first vehicle. Well, living in a big city, it was harder for him to go out and get a job, and nobody would hire him till he was 16. So I bought him his very first vehicle, but the deal is he needed to go to work, use it to go to work, and then he would pay me the half of the vehicle that was owed, right? So I gave him the vehicle, but I wouldn't give him the title until he paid his half. Well, the whole time, my wife and I, what our plan was, is we just really wanted to bless him, right? And so we helped him develop like a plan on how he could, set a budget, go to work, pay off the vehicle. And he wanted to make like monthly installments on the vehicle. And I'm like, nope, just pay yourself every single month and put it in an envelope. And then when you reach that mark, then it'll be done. And of course he'd go and, blow his money, and he didn't have enough money to pay for what he was supposed to pay for that month. And it kept just like prolonging it. And I'm like, dude, trust me on this. Like, just stick to the plan. It'll be worth it in the end. And the whole time my wife and I, what we planned on doing is once he paid it all off, once it was done, I was going to turn around and hand him that envelope full of money and be like, okay, here's everything that you worked for. Now go take that and go buy new tires or get a new windshield or whatever you need to do. But because he couldn't get on track and stay on, on point, he kept like prolonging the blessing, and he kept prolonging the blessing. And then all of a sudden the Lord like nailed me. And he was like, Cody, every time you were taking a drink, you were prolonging the blessing in my life personally. And so, yeah, it was like crazy. And it was like the Lord like revealed that to me because, and I don't know, maybe being a dad and raising children, like I really do believe that God uses children to teach parents like valuable lessons. And that was one of them for me, and so with Alden, after he finally, saved up enough money, and then he was like, okay, it's done. And he gave me the envelope, and it was awesome. We got to bless him and gave all that money back to him so he can go get new tires or whatever he needed for his vehicle. But it was from that lesson that the Lord taught me, like, hey, Cody, this whole time that you wouldn't stop drinking and you wouldn't put it away, you kept prolonging the blessing. And once I finally was obedient to what he was asking me to do, that's when I came out with the very first Jenny Bit. And then now it's got to the point where with a lot of prayer and consideration, we went all in and we bought the equipment. And now I quit my full-time job working in the aerospace and defense industry. And now I'm doing this full time as like a bit manufacturer and working with the maker community. And so, yeah, sorry for that really long answer on why I'm a maker, but
no, that's awesome. But the cool thing is that the maker community has just taken you in as far as the Jenny Bit. And like, yeah. I mean, people are loving it, and Onefinity, don't they? That's like their bit that they use. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, and all the people, I mean, anybody I know that has a CNC uses a Jenny Bit. Everybody. And so
it's been incredible, man. It's been really cool. And I don't know, I think being in the trenches with all the other makers out there, I mean, I'm an end user of my own product, and I design my tools specifically for machines like ours. And because I'm so involved in the maker community, I mean, I think that's what really makes it special, you know, because I'm not just some gigantic bit manufacturer. Like I'm literally just like the dude 2 houses down who has a 2-car garage trying to make stuff on his CNC router. Like, and I don't ever want to lose that. You know, I think there's something special about kind of that grassroots movement and really the whole story with the Jenny Bits and even how it got its name, just how the bit came into play just in general. It's all been organic and it's all been community driven, which has been absolutely incredible.
Yeah. One of the things that's really cool is not only are you a maker, but you know your crap as far as bits are concerned. I remember at Workbench Con, we're standing there in a group of people, and it's like John Malecki and Travis from Fix This Build, or Brad from Fix This Build That, and we're like standing there, and you pull out this bit, and they're like, "What makes this different than any other bit?" And you're like, "Oh, well, let me tell you." But you explained it in a way that was like, this is why, and let me show you why it's better and why it works better for your machine. And I was just standing there like, I don't have a CNC, but I'm like, I want a Jenny Bit. Like, I don't even know what I'd use it for. But it wasn't that you were selling it as a salesperson. Like, you were knowledgeable on why the geometry of the flutes are the way they are and why it's good for plywood and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I was super impressed with your understanding and knowledge of, you know, bits and tooling and manufacturing.
Well, I still have a lot to learn, so a long way to go, but I'm getting there.
You know, you shared it with us when we were at Workbench Con, how the name Jenny Bit came about, but probably most of our listeners don't know that. You mind sharing that story right quick? Yeah.
So, before we went all in and I ended up buying the CNC grinder to make my own tools, because the position that I worked, I got my feet wet making different tool geometry for our big, like 5-axis, like aerospace parts. And so I already had a kind of a good understanding of what we needed to do when it came to like tool geometry. And when I was having the problems, like rigidity issues on my belt driven machine at home, I started working with a company here locally in Arizona who was making all of our custom tools. And so I was like, hey, I want to make this tool. I'm trying to manage the rigidity issues on my belt-driven machine. I was like, I want to try this. And, you know, we did probably 7 different iterations. And the other thing, too, is as I was doing this, I was talking to other people in the community. And so I was getting feedback from other dudes about just like compression routers and what they would like to see and what would be really good. And so I was getting all this different input, and then I was trying different tool geometry, and I'd get a tool made. I spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars just developing my own tool. And the whole time, like, I never did it with the intention of selling tools. Like, that thought never even crossed my mind, right? And so as I was like going down this journey and started making tools for my machine at home, to solve the rigidity issues, I was sharing it with people on Facebook, and I was like, hey, this is what I'm, working on. And I showed them the compression router that I did, because it wasn't called Jenny at the time. It was just, this was the bit. And everyone's like, man, that's really awesome. I want to try one. And so I was like, okay, well, I hosted a group buy on Facebook, and a bunch of us pooled our money together, and I had 100 of these bits made. And when I went in, I was like, okay, I need to make 100 of these. They're like, all right, well, we need to make it official. We need to give it a part number. And so at the shop that I used to work at, there was always a running joke. And anytime somebody would be like, hey, what blueprint are you working on, or what part number are you working on? Without fail, somebody would always say, oh, it's 8675309. And so when they asked me to give my bit a part number, I was like, I don't know, man, like 8675309, because it was an inside joke that we had, at the shop. And when I hosted the group buy and I put it on Facebook, the community saw the part number 8675309. Well, people started calling the bit Jenny, and the name stuck. And so that's how the whole Jenny, like, I haven't named a single tool. I haven't named one. It's all been from the community. And then the neat thing is after I developed that very first tool, shared it with the maker community, they saw the part number, they started calling the bit Jenny. Well, every bit that I released after that, I would let people submit names, and then they would vote on it. So all the tools that I have now, there's like the Jenny, the mini Jenny, the downtown Jenny, the uptown Jenny, the groovy Jenny, like all these different tools is from people in the community who gave it a name. So when I say like this whole thing's been organic, like literally it's all been maker made from the very get-go. And so that's where the Jenny name came from. And then it was funny too, like with the logo. So the logo says Jenny, and it's got the bit and the J. And then there's like the little lips on the side. When we were working on the logo, like I was talking to my wife about it, and we were kind of like joking, like, okay, remember like when you were dating and you had a girlfriend and she would like write you a love letter, and then she would like kiss it and then put it, on the windshield of your truck or whatever, and kind of like that girl next door feeling. Like it was my wife's idea to put the lips on there, and kind of like a high school crush thing or something like that, and it just fit, and it was really funny. So
that's awesome.
That's how the whole name and logo and the whole Jenny thing started.
And for those who are listening who don't know, that's from a song. So yeah. The younger crowd, right? 8675309, and right, that number is Jenny's number, right? That he's calling in the song. So yeah, so it was a song so the song's older than I am. It came out before I was even born, which is funny. But yeah, it's about a girl, and her phone number was 8675309, and her name was Jenny, and yeah, it just kind of took over from there. And now it's kind of has like it's a life of its own. Like, you go to another bit manufacturer, and people don't remember 46732R30 as a part number, but everybody remembers Jenny. So it kind of worked out to be a stroke of marketing genius on accident. But that's kind of the story behind Jenny and how the name got there. Wow,
that's cool, man.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's fun watching makers in the community explode, if you will, or grow. I started doing the Willie's Wood Honey and selling that, and it's done pretty well. But a buddy of mine, Nick's Custom Woodworking, started Boss Dog Wood Glue. He just had to buy a second filler because he can't keep up with how many orders are going, and the community's just brought him in and like is buying everything that he makes. And to his, he kind of got into a really, really good niche because nobody else makes glue. You got Tight Bond and Gorilla. Nobody really else makes wood glue. And so he comes out, a maker in the community, makes a wood glue, and people are like, it's insane watching the stories on Instagram, like how much glue he's making. But that's awesome. That I know that when we were hanging out at Workbench Con, your phone would keep dinging, and it'd be orders, and you brought your bits with you, and you were fulfilling orders at Workbench Con, which is hilarious. I remember too, because you and I got an Uber back to the airport, and we had breakfast that morning, and you know, we had terminals not far from each other, but you had to pay a lot of money to ship those bits.
Yeah.
Well, you're brave. You're brave because I mean, the amount of bits and the profit that's within those bits was paled in comparison to what it cost you to ship them. But to trust American Airlines or whoever it was with your bits.
Well, I got a GPS tracker that I put in the suitcase. Like I was tracking it the whole time, but you're right. It was kind of a risky move, but I'd done stuff like that before, you know, so I kind of knew what to expect, and I'd probably do it a little bit different next time around. But yeah,
That's awesome.
A little nerve-wracking.
So Workbench Con, some of those guys, I know you're giving bits out to some of the guys. Have any of those guys reached back out to you and like ask questions or use the bit?
Yeah. So, you know, there's several. So it's interesting because at Workbench Con, like, there's all these people that I follow and that I've watched for, you know, years, and like there's guys that I look up to, and so actually like meeting them in person, like it was great. But the cool thing is like, because we're all makers, and even though I'm not a big like content creator, I'm still kind of in those circles. It's like I don't make YouTube videos, but I'm friends with a lot of people with channels who do, you know. So it was really cool just kind of going there and being a part of that. And but yeah, I started working with Izzy Swan. So he's got my tools, and he was already putting out some videos. And I was just talking to him the other day. He's actually going to be making a video specifically about the Jenny bits because he absolutely loves them. And so he's going to be doing a YouTube video on that. And you know, of course, I work with all the guys at Carveco and all the guys at, you know, Onefinity, but I met guys at Next Wave CNC. So I've been talking to them a lot. They make the Shark CNC machines. You know, they're in every Rockler store across the United States. And so that's looking pretty promising. I'm pretty excited about that. Gosh, there's several people that I talked to and gave bits out to, and it was awesome. I'm so thankful that I went. I'm really glad that I went. It was totally worth it.
Yeah, and for you, it made sense. Tom and I have talked that it was expensive, and the classes I thought were kind of subpar. And so we've talked it several times on the podcast that we just probably won't go back because I can't afford to justify going back. If I would have got a whole ton of sales for my wood finish and it became a thing that, you know, I can maybe see it. It's a pricey, it's a not a cheap date to go to Workbench Con.
No, well, you know what? So I have a 12-step plan, and every month we'll just put away a little bit in an envelope for you. And then when it comes time for Workbench Con, we can just, you know, go.
There you
I hope
go.
we go next year. I'm going to go again next year. I think I think it's a must for me.
Yeah.
Just because I work so closely with the entire Onefinity team, and even like Hamilton Dilbeck, you know, he's got a pretty big YouTube channel, and he has that CNC with me. You know, community, you know, I'm really involved with that too. So it was cool going to Workbench Con because I went a day earlier, and we went to his house and went to his shop and shot a bunch of YouTube content like at his house before Workbench Con. And so it's just relationships like that alone is why I think it's important for me to go.
Right.
That's totally different for you because you have a tool that every single person there, well, 90% of those people have CNCs. So you have a humongous audience, and it only takes, like I said, Izzy Swan, your sales are going to go through the roof after that. You won't even talk to us after that. I mean,
I don't know about that, man. I'm always going to just be an old millbilly. Yeah. I don't think that'll ever change.
If I were to go back, it would be for one reason and one reason only, and that would be to hang out with you and the other guys that I met that I like. I was telling somebody, I was like, you know, I might not buy a Workbench Con ticket, but I might go to Atlanta and then just go hang out at the restaurants in the area and the and the lobby
Yeah.
just to meet the people. But because that's what I enjoyed, like hanging
Me
out
too.
with you guys and like Tyler Moore that we met, and
Tyler was awesome.
Andrew's woodworking, even though I'm old enough to be his granddad, I really enjoy. We went out and had dinner and quite a few other people. That was what I loved. It was awesome. But of course I'm not selling tools. So
Right.
I have to foot the bill out of my pocket.
That's for me personally, that's why I'm in this. I'm in it for the community, and Will, I shared this with you. Like for me, I'm not just making like a cutting tool, right? Like for me, I believe with everything that's in me that every human being on this planet has been given a God-given gift of creativity, right? Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, it says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness." And so because of that, it's like, man, I get to participate in your God-given gift of creativity. That makes it so much more than just a cutting tool for me. It's not a Jenny bit. Like it's something special that I get to be a part of. And then when I get to go to something like Workbench Con and meet the people who actually use my tools and I see all this beautiful work that they're doing, like that's what keeps me going, man. That's what gets me super excited. And so from the community alone, I mean, I would go to Workbench Con for that specifically. And it was funny because they have all those classes you can go to. And I was so busy talking to all these different people that I only made it to like 2 classes the whole time. And the whole time I was like, well, what's more beneficial? Am I going to have more benefit going to this hour class about AI? Or is it going to be more beneficial for me to go and like talk to people? And the very first class I went to, they were like, you got to focus on your community. Number 1, I was like, well, that answers that question. Like, so I didn't go to any of the other classes after that. I just hung out with people and just talked to people and networked. And yeah, it was great. I loved it.
Yeah. And that was my thing. Like I would go back, if Tom was there, you, Corin, and then Tyson Moore, we all kind of jive. We had dinner that night together with everybody. And so that's what I want to go back for, because what I realized is there are a lot of believers at Workbench Con, and there are a lot of people that need the influence of Christ in their lives.
Yeah.
And so going there and having some of those conversations with people and that part of it was worth it. So to your point, if I put, $100 a month back.
Well, here's the thing. If you don't buy a ticket, like you can still go to the outside lobby where like Onefinity and Oneida, where all those guys were set up. You can still walk around and do all that. You just can't go to the classes, and you can't go into the main hall where they would have their opening ceremonies and they'd feed you or whatever.
Right. Yeah. And so I don't know. We'll see. Maybe my finish will take off and some company will say, hey, I'll pay for your ticket to come here.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. So very cool. Well, we'll roll into some shop talk. Tom, what do you got going on in the shop?
Well, I am going to be leaving tomorrow and driving cross country. So I'm going to pick up a piece of equipment. My next door neighbor has a plumbing company, and they bought this big jet machine that, goes in and flushes out lines and stuff. And so the piece of equipment is manufactured in Georgia, not ironically, about 30, 45 minutes north of the city I hate, Atlanta. But it's only about 2 hours and 45 minutes from my mom. And we were having a conversation, and he told me what they were going to charge. They were going to charge him like $4,000 or $4,500 to ship this piece of equipment here, or they'd charge him $2,000 to ship it to their West Coast location in Los Angeles, and then he would have to drive down there and pick it up and then come back, take 2 days off work and hotel and all. I was like, dude, you should just pay me to I'll go to Georgia and pick it up, and I go visit my mom. And then he called me. He's like, "You serious? Would you do that?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So
Nice.
rather than paying the ridiculous shipping rate, basically, I'm not getting paid what I'd make if I stayed here and did sign work. But he's paying the gas and expenses to go there, plus giving me a little for driving, and it saves him the time of going to pick it up. And then also they'll get it a little quicker, which will in turn let him make money. And then I go spend a few days with my mom. So I am going to be leaving tomorrow and driving cross country, go spend a few days with my mom and help her do some things around the house, and then drive on up to Georgia, grab the piece of equipment, and drive back. So I'll have a enormous amount of podcast time this week. It's what my shop time will. So the closest thing I'll come to woodworking will be listening. We built a thing.
That's awesome. You there's a podcast that I really like called The Listener's Commentary. So it's a guy, John Whitaker. He's a pastor and theologian. And what he does is he just goes through books of the Bible and breaks it down. And so he'll do chunks, and like today it was Matthew, was it 21 or 22 verses 1 through 11? And he talks about it in the historical context of what's going on and why this was happening, and he'll read it. And so The Listener's Commentary, that's a good driving podcast.
We'll have to look that one up. I do have several faith-based, like I love listening to Robert Morris out of Gateway Church, and I love listening to Craig Rochelle out of Life Church. I listen to both of those every week and then I usually listen to We Built a Thing, and then the Woodshop Life podcast. And so, but yeah, I'll have to look that one up because I'm going to run out of podcasts to listen. I got it's 27 hours each way. So,
yeah. Have you ever heard of Chuck Missler?
Who?
Chuck Missler.
No, I haven't. Who is that?
So he's recently, he passed away, I think, a couple of years ago, but he's written all kinds of awesome books about just like creation and science, and like he does a really good job of breaking down the word and going into like Greek and Hebrew. And I really enjoy, I like listening to his stuff. I listen to audiobooks all the time, so I'll just go and buy his audiobook and then listen to it for 30 hours. But it's really good, deep stuff. Like, it's crazy.
I'll have to look that up. I love reading books. I haven't ever done an audio book. I might have to give that a try. Typically, I'm a paperback. Like how a lot of people now read their Bible on their phone or their tablet, and I do have the Bible app on my phone, and I love it when I'm somewhere and want to quickly look up a verse or something. But yeah. I like to have the paper book in my hands. I don't know what it is, but I like reading my actual Bible. I like taking notes, and same thing when I read other books. I don't know what it is. I just prefer a book versus a digital device. It's kind of weird.
I used to be that way too, but I started using my tablet a lot. And so now it's so like Monday nights we host a Bible study at our house every Monday night. And then, so like I use that and we take notes I take notes as we go, and we're kind of digging through it. But I do the same thing on Sundays, but it's nice because I can have like the Bible open over here and then like a notepad on the other side. And I can just literally copy and paste scripture into my notes. And then I can highlight and write stuff down as I go. But it's really cool because I take that and then I share it on one of the Facebook groups I'm a part of.
Oh, that's
so
cool.
Every Sunday I share the notes that I get from the teachings, and I don't know, it just kind of turned into like one of my things that I just really like doing.
Yeah. And I've got friends that, man, they do all their reading either on their tablet or their phone, and they like that highlighting feature and all that, but I don't know why I'm that way. I just enjoy sitting down with a book. I think it's because, I do science for a living, and I'm on the computer a lot. And it just comes a point where I don't want to touch a digital device. I want something that gets me away from the computer and keyboard. And I do my reading early in the morning. I get up at 4:00 and go in there, turn the coffee pot on, and then it's just me, my Bible, and the lamp and a cup of coffee. And I don't know what the house is quiet because my wife and daughter are sleeping, and so it's.
I'm like you, Tom. I work in IT by day, and I don't like. I have the Bible apps on my phone for the same reason. I like look up something real quick, but I have a Bible problem. I probably have 10, 12, 15 Bibles, different translations, different study Bibles. I love Bibles, and I read them all, right? I don't just not read all these Bibles, but I'm the same way. Like it's that adage that I think Drew Witt had talked about is those who work with their mind during the day like to rest with their hands, and those who work with their hands rest with their mind. And so I work with my mind all day doing, I was doing programming today on a application that I helped build, or, whatever it is. And so I like the tactile feel of a book. I want to hold that book. And there's just something nostalgic about having a Bible in my mind, right? But I'm not against those who use the tablets and that. I mean, those technology has made the word so accessible to people. And
I'm like you. I have several versions, and a lot of time I'll get multiple versions and lay it out when I'm studying. But the one thing I do like about the Bible app, the YouVersion app, is like I can look up a verse and I can switch from version to version to version in a blink of an eye, and that comes in very handy. So I'm very thankful for that app, but still like my paperback.
So
absolutely.
It was a few months ago. I ended up getting this new tablet. It was like the Galaxy 9 tablet, whatever. And so I was all excited, but I was still like learning it, right? And so it was Sunday morning, and like I go there and I got my tablet out, and like the first worship song was like done, and we were getting ready to go to study or whatever, and it's completely quiet as the pastor's going up there and about to pray. And then I like open up my tablet, and then no kidding, it was like, "Hello, Cody Elkins, blah, blah, blah." And it was the loudest it can go. I was so embarrassing. It wasn't like a phone ringing, right? Like that you can just like quickly mute. But when it started saying my name in front of the whole church, like, oh my gosh, this is my nightmare. Like,
that's amazing.
It was pretty funny.
Man,
so anyways, I've never made that mistake again. So every time I go into church now, the volume is completely off.
Absolutely. Funny, as far as technology is concerned, so I use at work and for my note taking a thing called a Remarkable. So it's a digital note taking device. It's like looks like a Kindle, but you write on it. But before I had that, I had bought a Kindle Scribe, which my wife now uses, and she uses it all the time. But the one thing I miss about that Scribe is that you could have Bible on there because it's a Kindle, and then you could take notes in the Bible. So you could highlight a section and then attach a note to that highlight and actually write out your notes, and it would save it. And so going back through, I could look at the note that I made on that. My Remarkable can't do that. It's not a Kindle, right? I have a Bible on there, but there's not much interaction with it. But that was one thing that I really liked about that Kindle. Then I gave it to my wife when I got the Remarkable, and she reads on it, and she's a list maker and does all that kind of stuff. But that's cool, man. So Cody, what do you got going on in your shop, home shop? You doing anything? And now I know that you were having some consistency, accuracy issues with your big mill. Where are you at with that?
So I've been working with Anka. Matter of fact, today we just got some new software updates on the machine. So I was going through that. I was running some tools out, just making sure everything looks good. We got me a new chiller, got me a bigger chiller. So with these tools that I'm making, the tolerances are so tight that it's susceptible to thermal expansion and contraction. So keeping the temperature at a really consistent temperature is really important, especially when I'm loading up the machine and I'm using the robot and I'm doing a production run. And say I'm making 200 tools. Well, that machine's fully automated. So if I don't keep like the ambient temperature close to what the temperature is on the machine, it can actually affect how the machine grinds. So we just been dialing in all that stuff, and Inca's been working on the background to kind of get that all in order. And so like today I got it. I started running some tools, but I didn't have a lot of time to really dig in. So tomorrow I'll be grinding all kinds of tools tomorrow and just kind of getting data so I can get it back to the factory and see if it's better. But right now, I mean, it's still making tools, just not at the capacity that I really need it to be. So as soon as I get past this thermal issue, should be good to go. But I cover your prayer though, because it's so complicated. There's a lot of things going on, and like I said, I'm still learning as I go. So just pray for wisdom. And it's funny because I was having problems with the machine, and I was still outsourcing some of my tools while I was trying to get this all fixed. Well, right after Workbench Con, like the machine ran perfect for like 2 weeks, like perfect. And so I don't know if the Lord just knew that like I was going to have an increase in sales. And so he like miraculously fixed the machine so that I can get all that work done that I needed to. Like I literally felt like it was my floating axe head moment. It was do you remember that story in the Old Testament? I think it was Elisha. I can't remember if it was Elijah or Elisha, but like those guys that are out there working, and he had this axe head and he was like chopping down this tree, and it belonged to this like other person. And the dude who was chopping the tree, like something went wrong and the axe head flew into the river. And so he was like freaking out because he's like, oh my gosh, it's not even mine. I have to get it back to him. Like we need this tool to get the job done. And then Elisha ended up like floating the axe head out of the river, and they were able to retrieve it and then continue doing what they needed to do. And I felt like I had my floating axe head moment with the machine right after Workbench Con. So
that's awesome. That's 2 Kings chapter 6. It is Elisha.
Elisha.
Yep. Man, I heard that story in a minute.
It was just funny because I was like, that was my floating head moment in my life, the floating axe head.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad that everything went well, and hopefully it gets better as it goes, and then you can start running full bore on it. So
full tilt party.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as me, I haven't done too much in the shop this week, just mowing grass and outside playing with the kids. However, I am working from home tomorrow for half day, and then some friends from church and my wife and I are driving to Pittsburgh, which is about an hour and a half away. We're going to a Brandon Lake concert. He's doing his big arena tour, and so we're going down and we're going to go see him and just have some time to worship, which I'm really excited about. My wife has never been to a big concert like that, so this is
be fun.
Yeah, it'll be really fun. And I don't know if you guys listen to Brandon Lake. I mean, he's I don't know where you would peg him at, because he does music with Elevation and Bethel, and he does music with all these different churches. Everything that he writes, I haven't really found anything that's theologically unsound, but I like his stuff and excited to go see it. And the opening act is John Foreman, which if anybody knows that name, I don't, but that is the lead singer for Switchfoot, which is a Christian band from back in the day. So John Foreman will be opening for him, so it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I grew up, so in my hometown there was a Christian festival they did like for 15 years called the Ignite Festival. It's a big Christian rock festival, and so I drum teched it every year. It was a free festival, and it was all volunteer led, and so I got to meet all the guys from back in like the mid 2000s, all the rock bands, Skillet, Red,
yes,
all the people, right? And so I when I go to concerts, and because I'm a musician, I'm a drummer, it's hard for me to turn off the critique of the production, and the way the drums sound, the way the audio sounds, the way this goes, that goes, because that's what I'm wired. Because I've done that, and I've played drums, and I've played in big stuff like that. So maybe in my wisdom, because I haven't been to a big concert in a long time, so maybe in my years and my wisdom, I can tune that stuff out and just worship. so it'd be like Cody. It'd be like Cody picking up somebody else's bit and be like, "Oh, y'all ground this wrong," or Tom seeing a sign and be like, "Homeboy didn't hang that right." I can be in a venue and know that they're having issues with the audio. I'm the guy. They say that most people don't hear mistakes. I'm the guy that hears it, just because I've been doing it all my life. So I have to try to tune that stuff out. But I'm excited to go nonetheless.
Out of curiosity, like, who is your favorite Christian drummer?
Christian drummer. That's a hard one. There's not. Yeah. Okay. Austin Davis. Austin Davis is the drummer for Cody Carnes and for what's Cody's wife, Carrie Job, I think.
Oh yeah, she's got a nice voice.
But if you hear the song, I mean, he's one of the best and most fluid drummers I've ever seen. I mean, and he comes up with parts, and he's incredible. So yeah, Austin Davis, he's the drummer for Cody Carnes. So any Cody Carnes song that we sing in church, you hear "Take You at Your Word" or any of that stuff, that's Austin Davis. He's incredible. So
I'm so horrible when it comes with like names, and like I don't know drummers' names. I don't think I've ever known a drummer's name. Like,
well, you're not a drummer, right? So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I
can't even hardly keep a heartbeat, let alone a 4/4 beat. Come on.
Right, there you go. Hey, I've got a offbeat heart as well. I did testing throughout my whole childhood. I do stress testing and all kinds of stuff. So
yeah,
but it's enough that it's on my record. And when I go to a new doctor, and I've had it twice happen to me where they've had like an intern, and he'll be like, "Listen to the heart." I'll have the intern listen to my heart, and then he'll say, "Did you hear it?" I'm like, "No." He said, "Listen again," and they can never hear it because it's so faint. But I have an offbeat heart, and so I have my whole life, yeah. Which it hasn't prevented me from doing anything. I mean, I played sports and always been active and stuff like that. But yeah. So, man, Cody, it has been awesome having you on the podcast, hearing your testimony, hearing what's going on. Tell people where can they find you if they want to buy a Jenny Bit, if they want to find you on Instagram. Where can they find you at?
I think just the easiest thing to go to is jennybits.com. That'll take you directly to my website. Originally, it was cadencemfgdesign.com, but that's really big and long and hard for people to remember. So I got the domain name jennybits.com, and it just directs you to my website.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Have you had anybody ask you about that website name? Just because?
No.
Okay.
No, I was actually, so again, I'm just, man, the Lord has like blessed this on so many different levels. Like there's a lot of nefarious people out there.
Right.
And I'm the type of person where I don't know, I see somebody and, I take him at face value when I first meet them. But there's other people out there that they're not like that at all. And thankfully I have some friends that are very like, oh man, you got to protect yourself type of thing. So my buddy actually went out and he got the domain name jennybits.com and then gifted it to me because he was afraid that somebody else was going to try and steal it and then like hold it ransom if I ever grew my company to where it's really big and I needed to change it. And so it was actually a buddy of mine who got the
That's
domain
awesome.
name for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Domain names are an interesting thing. It's being in IT, I know all about that stuff. I've probably purchased in my career hundreds of domains, and so I know all about that. But That's awesome. Yeah. So jennybits.com. I'll put it in the show notes so people can find you, man. We really appreciate, pray that God continues to bless your business and your ministry and what you're doing at church and with your family and everything, man. And your wife's about to have another one and you're going to be out even more.
Man, we're 2 weeks out and man, I don't know. Childbirth, it just freaks me out. It's funny. So I grew up on ranches where, growing up hunting, like you can go and kill a deer and clean a deer and like whatever. But when it comes to the birth of a child, man, I don't like it. I get all nervous. I get all sweaty. Cause I can't do anything except for just like pray for and with my wife while it's happening. But I want it to be like the good old days when they would like smoke cigars and drink their brandy and like pace around. And then all of a sudden they walk in with a clean baby and like, here's your son. That's what I want it to be like. But
it's funny how everybody's different. With me, I don't get wheezy with anything. Like nothing gets me. But with my wife, I had no choice. When we had Eli, the nurse that was in the room when it was time to push, she's like, grab that leg. I'm like, wait, what?
Oh my gosh.
and so I was like, okay. Any married man out there that's been that intimate with childbirth, and you have a respect, and I respect my wife more than anybody on this planet, knowing what she went through. So
my wife was in labor for 21 hours and I was in there the whole time. And so I find it to be the most fascinating thing I've ever seen in my life. That it was just, and like you said, it gives you a whole new level of respect for your wife. Because that's the one thing us guys cannot do, regardless of what the liberals say. We cannot.
Well, so it was funny because with Evelyn, we had her in the hospital, and it was a terrible experience being at the hospital. Like, it was just crazy. But then with Eliza and with Abigail, we ended up going through like a midwife and went to a birthing center, and that was incredible. It was so good. Except for we almost had the baby in the car. That's a story I'll share with you another time. But this time my wife's like, I want to do home birth. And I'm like, oh Lord, here we go. So we're doing a home birth this time, and it's
That's crazy.
I'm freaking out.
we were lucky that my wife was one of the managers of the hospital where we had our kids, and so she got like red carpet treatment. And actually when we had Eli, it was in 2020, May of 2020, and I about flipped that hospital upside down because they weren't going to let me in, and then they realized who I was. And they're, oh, you're Hannah's husband. Okay, come on. Because the way everything was shut down. And they're like, nobody can come in. And I was like, I will burn this hospital to the ground if I can't see the birth of my son. And luckily it all worked out and everything was good there. But awesome, man. Well, Cody, we appreciate you coming on the podcast. And
thank you so much.
We'll look forward to continue to watching the growth and staying close. And who knows, maybe I'll make it back to Workbench Con next year. We'll see what happens there. But until next week, I'm Will from Fly Woodworks.
And I'm Tom from Mountain Valley Maker.